Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Goaltending Lab or Inside Edge podcast. We haven't really married either of those ideas yet, but I've spent a couple days in the hospital becoming a father. So I've come back to one of the wisest men I know in terms of hockey and raising kids to ask some questions today about the perspective of working as a goaltender, what qualities you look for, how guys are looked at from a development perspective. So, what's going on, Coach Clark? How we doing?
Good morning and congratulations, Gehrig.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Welcome to fatherhood, and you're going to be a great dad. You got a lot of good people around you to help you out, and they're not far away. So, congrats. No one's going to have a good upbringing. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Yep. And Mama and him are healthy. They're hanging out on the couch right now. So,
Awesome. Good.
all right, let's get into some hockey, Coach.
Sure.
One of the things that we wanted to talk about right off the bat today is we've obviously worked with guys at varying levels of development throughout hockey. We talked a little bit pre-show about the relationship between baseball and hockey and the varying levels of developmental leagues before you can reach the professional level, whether that's the NHL or a professional league in a different country. So yeah, just talk about some of your guys, what you saw in them, what guys that scouted them and drafted them saw in them.
Yep. The obvious one of my favorites is Helly, Connor Hellebuyck, and he and I joined forces when he was 18, and going on 19. And so we've been together, so to speak, I think so it's at 15 years, 14 years. So 2011, um, he came to one of our scouts, invited him to our main camp in junior hockey. So to step back, we had a group of people in Odessa, Texas, with the Jackalopes, who was a pro team. We had a pro coach, Paul Gillis, who really did a really good job with the pro team. Great owners, unbelievable owners. But the business model became unraveled with minor league hockey, and the what was coming in wasn't matching what was going out. So that's not a good business deal. So junior hockey was just starting to, get a little bit of traction, and a lot of the teams in Texas, Amarillo, Corpus Christi, San Angelo for a little bit, who had minor league teams, they're all going junior hockey. So we did that. So we had our first training camp in I think it was, and one of our scouts. We were all new to the junior league. We knew nothing about junior hockey, nothing. But the scout that we hired, Craig Sarner, did, and he saw or knew of a goalie, Connor Hellebuyck, and he invited him right away, and he showed up. So today, when a junior program has their main camp, so to speak, or they have a tryout camp, they'll invite 60 goalies, right? And first of all, how do you evaluate 60 goalies?
Yeah.
Really can't. So it's a little bit of I don't like the way they do it, but I understand it. I respect it. They'll have 60 goalies, and they'll have one day where they'll have 60 goalies. So two groups of 30 on the ice, blah, 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 doing drills. They have 6 stations. And so they cut it down to 20 or so, depending on the team and how many teams they're going to have in camp, 2 or 3 per team. So we didn't do that. Odessa, and this is kind of naive to how we wanted to operate, but I like how we did it. We invited 8. And so Helly gets on the ice and he's out there, and I immediately saw a little something different in him. Like he knew a little bit what he was doing, a lot of what he was doing. He had focus and he had drive, and you could see it right away. He was over here and everyone else is over there. And our coaching staff, Paul Gillis and Matt Cressman, and our scouting group, we huddled together and said, okay, this is a no-brainer. This kid is our guy, and we'll grab another goalie to be his backup. And and I can't remember the kid's name. His last name was Davis. It might have been Justin Davis or something like that, but they were our 2 goalies. So I started working with Helly. I get out there a couple of times a week, and goalie coaches, really, you can't be a helicopter coach. You got to let him go, train him a little bit, talk to him. I think the best thing that Connor and I did is that, we got on the ice, did a lot of work, worked on specific things, but the most valuable thing he got out of our relationship was our conversation. And now it's spread over 14 years. Fast forward to today. Early on, the conversations that we'd have, whether it's a phone call or a text, thousands of texts, literally. So he spent 1 year in junior hockey, and then boom, he was at UMass Lowell for 2 seasons. And throughout his 2 year career at UMass Lowell, he absolutely killed it. And won the Mike Richter Award his sophomore year, and then he was done. But the conversation that we have about situations that he's in, I remember a phone call that I had, and I think he was in Czech Republic. I think it was with when the U.S. had a world team in the World Championships. They created a U-25 team, 25 and under, and I think it was called Team North America. So you had Canadians and Americans on it. One of the goalies is one of his goalie partners is Matt Murray. So this was probably 2015 or 16, right around that. Matt Murray just won, I think, back-to-back cups with Pittsburgh. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think 16 and 17, right?
Yeah.
That sounds
Right.
about right.
So, I'm on the phone with Helly. I get a text from Helly, and he says, "Hey, can we talk?" And that situation happened so many times. He just needs to talk. And he was in a bit of a pickle. A certain goalie he couldn't get in any reps in practice with the US 25 on. Like the other goalies, his goalie partners were hogging the net. And he said, "What do I do? I had no idea, how do I handle that?" So you take that situation and multiply it by 25, 30 times, and that's how we have developed what we've developed. No, you fast forward to now, and he's 32 years old. He knows what's going on. But we've been through so much together, and it's really the most of it was our conversation. I took him under my wing, and we talked a lot and talked about different scenarios. And as time went on, Gehrig, there was less talk about the actual physical play, what he's doing on the ice. And I don't like to, I can't, I never have done this. You got to play like this. Tell a goalie, you've got to have a certain style. Or like pitchers in baseball, and we've talked about it before. Everyone's got their own style, and you just got to, make your best version of you that you can. And but once you hit a certain level of talent, it's all mental. It's all mental, and you hit the National League. Even as you're progressing, the mental part of it is everything. You've got to make sure you can't become unwound, right? And you have plenty of opportunity to do that. So you're failing all the time because you're letting pucks get by you, and sometimes you have no chance. The thing I think that he got the most out of our relationship was the conversations, and they're private, and they talk about a lot of different things in the hockey world and how to deal with it. But sometimes it's just put his mind at ease, so he'd go out and just go do his thing. But when you're that age, whether you're 20 or 19 or 22, you're just a kid, and you need that support. Um, and really, he and I have had a great relationship. I was on the phone with him yesterday. One thing he does, and this is great, and this is what I like about, his mindset. He's a very humble guy. He gets on every summer, once a year. The clients I have 10 or 12 clients, goalie, only goalies, right? The clients that I have. And we do a Zoom call together with them. And yesterday we arranged or set in stone the Zoom call. So we're going to have it this Thursday. What's Thursday? 28th, I think. And so we'll get on a Zoom call, and he gets to meet, or they get to meet him and talk, and they can ask him any questions that they want. And he gets into it. Like he doesn't look like it's being a pain in the rear end to him, wasting his time. Like he knows what they're going through, and he really gets into it. And he answers questions, and he gets deep into the answer, which is
For
really
sure.
nice. And I
That's
I think the kids really need that.
absolutely. That's you mentioned before about not being a sort of helicopter coach and telling guys how to play their position, and especially when they have that raw talent you were talking about naturally, that it's a lot more about developing the mental side of it. So Maybe talk about that a little bit. What can you do as a coach to help with that mental development after, say, 17, 18, 19, 20 we were talking about?
Yeah, well, you go through your performances, and you go through your not only in games but in practice. And what are you doing right? What are you searching for? And you got to put his mind at ease, and you got to talk to him about the very specific situation that he's in or he's talking about. Play behind the net. How can I tweak that? Depth, increased depth is a big one. The further you come out, the more there's a big old back door wide open. And the higher level that you go, players can execute way better. And especially in National League, they can execute. So I remember having a conversation, probably he was early 20s. So maybe, I think 22 was his first year in the National League with Winnipeg. And had a conversation. I just thought his depth needed to be tweaked a little bit. And I remember him telling me why he likes to sit back a little bit. He says, I want to make those difference maker saves. And I want to be able to get to that back door. I want to be able to get there. If I'm that far out, I can't do it. From that point on, I backed off. I said, okay, you know exactly what you're doing. So, and his goalie coach in Winnipeg, Wade Flaherty, I got the nicest compliment from Helly. He had just gotten to Winnipeg and probably, I don't know, a month in, and we're on the phone. And I said, how's it going? How do you like it? And we talked about Wade. And I had met Wade earlier that year one time, and first time I ever met him. And he said, you know what? He's just like you. So his approach was similar to my approach, and I think that really helped Connor a ton.
Yeah,
Um,
that's huge.
there's no yelling, there's no screaming, there's no humiliating anyone, there's no pressure. Former goalies, whether it's I played, but not at a high level, Wade played at a high level. When we played, the game was totally different. When Wade played, it was different than it is now. When I played, yeah, not even close. But you have a goalie coach that understands what the guy's going through and walk him through it. How would you do this differently? How would you handle this situation differently? So you go over video, talk about situations, and you can't overdo it with video. You've got a little bit at a time. But that's how I went through it with Connor when we were together in juniors. And further on, we just talked. It was really about our conversation about situations he's in. And he's had some low moments in the National Hockey League where he's doubting not everything, but a couple of things that's going on. And he would text me, say, hey, can we talk? And absolutely. That's happened, you know, typically once a year, twice a year. But as he gets older, the conversations are more about how are your kids doing?
Yeah.
And as of now, he's got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so he's busy, but he's handling it pretty well. But it's a process, Gehrig. It's such a process. And the higher you go, the more complex the process can be, but at the same time, simplifies. I've always told goalies, the older you get, the easier the game gets because you understand what you're doing. You understand situations, and you've seen them a million times. 2-on-1s, guys coming down, for example, the dot lane or outside the dot lane is a very awkward situation in a game. How do you handle that? Your depth, do you square up or do you load up, post load? What do you do? And these guys have to figure that out for themselves. And I can help them with that. But Connor's progression involved a lot of that. But as time went on, like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Sometimes he needs to hear some words of encouragement. Like he knows that I know his game, as well as anyone, and he needs to hear it from maybe an outside source once in a while. But I don't talk about his situational play anymore. I don't even want to talk. I don't even want to talk to him about it. Now,
Yeah.
take
It's
a step
much
back. Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's much more, as you were saying, when you get older, you understand that you're playing a professional men's game, but it's at the same time, it's a game that you play when you're a kid too. So
Yep.
you're
Yep.
supposed to still be having fun. It's the pressure you put on yourself as a young kid, at least I did as a pitcher and a goalie. You feel that from the time you're 16 to whether you're go professional or don't reach that level of success. We talked a lot about Helly. Is there another guy that, maybe the situation was different or coaching or scouting or something that they saw in him that maybe didn't translate into the professional game as well?
Yeah, well, there's a kid that I worked with for a year. I saw him when I was scouting with the Islanders, and the kid is now with Dallas's organization. He's in the minor leagues, but kid name is Ben Kraws, Kraws, and I saw him. He just got called up to the USHL, and he was with Sioux City. And I'm at a game, and I didn't know that he just got called up. And I was watching warm-ups, and he's just a skinny, tall scarecrow. Like, but boy, could he skate. Could he ever skate? And like really fluid. And I absolutely loved his game. And I'm thinking, as a scout, you got to project where you think the kid's going to be in a few years. I'm thinking, man, this guy puts some little bit of weight on him and gets some man strength to him. He's going to be good because of his skating and his patience. He had great patience, and he looked like at a very young age, his instincts were really good. So I liked him a lot. So I knew the coach at Sioux City. I went down and I had a little conversation with him. Then I met Ben, and then we didn't see each other for a while. That year with the draft, with the Islanders, we had to draft a goalie. We had to take a goalie, and we had a list of. I was working with Chris Terreri. It was before they had a goalie group, like they have now. Chris Terreri was a great college goalie and a great goalie in the National Hockey League with New
I think you
Jersey.
mentioned him last week as well.
Yeah, yeah. So Chris and I had to pick a goalie, um, and we had we probably started with 25 guys and scouted them all out, and your list gets kind of whittled down. Well, Ben Cross was in the final two, right? And people were like, wow, I don't get it. Non goalie guys were looking at him and his resume on paper, going, I don't see it. I go, well, I see it. And I liked him. They wound up taking a Czech goalie, and he was really good. He had more man strength, but they took him instead. And Ben Kraws wound up going. He went to, I think I want to say he went to college. Then he switched college. He went to Arizona State. That was a disaster for him. And then he finished at St. Lawrence, and he did really well at St. Lawrence. And then Dallas signed him, I think 1 or 2 years ago. His development, like I kept telling people, he's going to be a pro, but you can be a pro, but if you get in the wrong organization where it's going to be like, how would you like to be a goal, say 3 years ago, being drafted by Winnipeg
Boston
or Boston with Swayman, right? Like
and
that's,
Brandon Bussey in the minor leagues. Like, we're talking about a position that's one guy.
yeah,
So
yeah,
even if you have three, the third guy is typically down in your minor league affiliate. So it
yep,
is incredibly, incredibly hard to break through.
yes,
We
yes,
we talked a little bit about how, or you said specifically that you can't really instruct a guy technically, like on the style butterfly versus
yeah,
freestyle.
yeah,
That stuff is far less relevant, especially as they get older, and it's clear that they have natural talent. Talking about, it's ironic too. I swear we haven't done this on purpose. We've talked about Dallas, Boston, and Winnipeg mostly, the three franchises that have an American goaltender. I don't know if we did that on purpose or not, but so what I was going to ask is talking about what you like, how you start to develop when you say, because Helly, a lot of people, I would say that the main thing with Helly and other guys of his ilk is clearly not a talent issue. It's a head space thing. But you talk about conversations you have with him being more about just regular day to day life. Talk about like the compartmentalization of realizing, hey, like, you're gonna let in bad ones. We were talking about golf before the show. Even a scratch golfer, a -3 or +3 regular handicap, is going to have 4, 3, 4, 5 shots. It's about managing mistakes at the professional level.
yeah, yeah. And so here's how Helly does it now. Helly will look at a situation where he gets beat or he's struggling with whatever he's struggling with, and his mentality is this: now I got something to work on. And I try to preach that, and that's hard to preach to a kid who's 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, because you have to have supreme confidence to have that mentality. He doesn't worry about what if it all goes south. He looks at it in a positive manner. Okay, no big deal. Now I got something to work on. This is going to be fun. And it sounds corny, but boy, oh boy, if you can conquer that, you're going to have a long career. And, uh, and I've got another kid, and I think Ben Cross is close to that. I worked with him for one season, a lot of video, a lot of phone calls, and that was it. And it's hard to, he had goalie coaches along the way. So you don't want too many voices, especially goalie voices being thrown at you. So there's another kid who's actually from Omaha, Nebraska, Caden Lenz, who has a very similar approach to Hellebuyck. And he is trying to make a team in the North American Hockey League, the NAL. Big guy, 6'3", 6'4", but his mindset, he's a friendly guy. He's a really good-natured guy, like to a really high level of that mentality, and nothing bothers him. And I remember telling Connor this when he was really young, and it blew his mind when I said this to him. I said, "You got to not care." He's like, "What do you mean? What do you mean I got to not care? What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you got to not care about failing." I said, "Of course you care about, your performance and all that. You have to care, and you have to put the work in. But what I'm saying is you got to not care when it goes south, because you just got to work on it." So now you fast forward to this day, and Connor Hellebuyck's mentality is he doesn't worry about that. He looks at it like, okay, now I got something to work on. In a way, it's about not caring, and it's kind of complex to talk about it. But when you throw that at an 18-year-old, you got to not care. It takes a very special individual to absorb that in the right manner. Does that make sense, Gehrig?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was trying to remember who it was. I don't know if you remember the clip of Ilya Brizgalov, and I don't want to do the impression, but he's in the locker room and they're asking him a bunch of questions about a recent bad loss he's taken. And he looks straight to the camera and he goes,
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
that duck water on back, running off your back sort of mentality is just, it's something that I never was able to do. I never played at a high level, but playing such a individual man in the arena position, it is such a crucial thing for your development as a goal. Like the guy that I think of as a Boston Bruins fan, Tim Thomas, he wasn't as much a let it roll off your back guy, but he defended that net like a dog. Like
Yeah.
he was a rabid animal when he was in there, and he was not traditional. He did not have a style whatsoever.
Yep. Yep. No, you're exactly right. I remember he played college at Vermont. The old Vermont coach, Mike Gilligan, was a really, really close friend. And he had a really good career at Vermont. And then he went to Finland, if I'm not mistaken. Tim Thomas did. And
He actually had a very cool story for his career. He almost was out of hockey a couple times.
Yep.
Because of that. We talked about it, or you talked about it specifically, stuff that you don't traditionally look for when you're scouting goaltenders. A lot of guys passed on him for that reason, because he was not an orthodox goalie.
Right, right. And hey, organizations make mistakes. Some NHL organizations just, they're not, the people that are scouting, they can make mistakes, but there's no guarantee. Whoever you draft or whoever you bring in your organization, there's no guarantee. It's a gamble. And some gambles pay off and don't. I swear some organizations are jinxed, like the Flyers. Holy smokes. For years.
It's especially with hockey, is with how superstitious freak hockey fans are, myself included. I think about, we talked about it last episode, the difference year to year for a guy like Linus Ullmark, who was a castaway from Buffalo when the Boston Bruins signed him. Then next year, a Vezina winner, breaking the regular season franchise record for wins with the Bruins.
Yeah.
And then the year after that, he's getting shipped off because they can't play defense in front of him. It's certain extenuating circumstances out of your control as a goalie that mentality we've talked about is so crucial for.
Well, Linus Ullmark's a great example of when he was in Buffalo, I saw him play and I'm like, oh, I don't like this guy, and he goes to Boston. When Boston signed him, I'm like, boy, this ought to be interesting. However,
Same.
they brought in a great coach in Jim Montgomery, right? Whether you're a fan of Montgomery or not, his team will be very disciplined and play a really good, solid system. It thrives. Any goalie would thrive in that, right? Connor Hellebuyck in college, UMass Lowell, they had a very structured system of play in their own zone and in general overall. And it allowed him to shine even more. Linus Ullmark, same thing. The difference is when Connor went to a team like Winnipeg in the early days where they didn't play very good D, right? I think they led the league in 2-on-0s against for a long time. He kind of used that opportunity to shine and mold his game. Ullmark had a good team in front of him, but he played really well in Boston, really well. He did a great job. He deserved all the accolades. And who's he with now? Ottawa?
Yeah, he's with Ottawa.
Was Ottawa. So, and I think it's kind of dipped a little bit for him. But
But they made playoffs for the first time in a few
yeah,
years with him. It's just it goes to show being in a place like Buffalo. I'll say stuck, even though that feels
yeah,
mean.
you're
Being
right.
stuck in Buffalo, moving to a place like Boston, where it's a very well-known factor on the league that we have a fantastic goalie development system. We've been stacked for years at that position, and it only showed with that year-to-year transition. And when you talk about Monty, the year he's gone, now that whole structure is loosened, and Linus Ullmark doesn't look like the same guy whatsoever. So it is. I love that inside the game, deep nerd stuff about. Like I love that Boston is known as a place that we can develop you. If you have talent, it doesn't matter. We'll mold you to whatever is going to make you the best version of yourself. So
Yeah, and I think in Boston, Jim Montgomery is not known as a goalie guy. Like when I was with him at University of Denver, he knows everything about the game, everything about systems. He's very structured, very analytical, and a really good, just a good coach. Did not know goaltending.
yeah, the
Right?
Bob
And that
Esna.
I think that scared him a little bit back then. But fast forward going into Boston, I think he was surrounded by professional people, goalie coaches that have been established. And I think he probably has learned a lot since his days at Denver about goaltending, what to say, what not to say. Um,
Yeah.
they're also older. These are pro athletes, so you can't handle them like you can handle college guys.
Well, yeah. And also just to clarify, I meant Monty did his job as the head coach in facilitating the entire team, where Bob Esna is the Bruins goalie coach. He has been for 23 years.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
the guy that I think stirs the drink in the background that won't ever get the credit unless you're a guy that listens to Boston sports radio and you're a sicko that bleeds black and gold and you know the inner workings of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, the head coach has got to have complete trust, and they always do, in the goalie guy. And, you know, just leave it there. And the goalie coach will be a big buffer between the head coach and the goaltender himself, because you don't want to get into a pissing match with a goalie, yelling and screaming or having words with a goalie. Let him play. He knows what's going on. But the goalie coach is really the buffer and a much needed buffer. And I think, um, has done that in Winnipeg, but not a lot because Helly's had a great career and there's not a lot of stress going on there. Unless
Yeah,
it's
no notes.
What's that?
I said, yeah, no notes. Typically, I imagine is how that meeting goes.
Yeah, no, they're pretty brief. But again, your goalie coach has to have the right mindset, the right mentality, when to talk and when to shut up.
Yeah,
Right?
super
And
important, like a caddy in golf.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Actually, really similar to that. Some other kids. So you got a kid like Caden Lenz, who's a young kid. He's 18 years old now. Like I think he's gonna be a pro if he continues. Another kid, Johnny Nanos, who's another Nebraska goalie, hasn't found an opportunity yet. Same age, I think, but he hasn't found an opportunity. Very good goalie, good size. There's a bunch of guys around that are going to be pretty good. You want to talk about the list? Talk about Evan Cowley, who I had at Denver, and I've stayed in close touch with since then. So he was drafted by Florida. 4th round draft pick, I don't know what year. So he's at Denver, and he came to Denver, I think, if this isn't accurate, it's pretty close. He arrived on campus as a 17-year-old. Now, he might have been 18. He might have arrived on campus, and then he turned 18 shortly after. He was 17 or 18. Extremely young, like way too young. Denver had lost. I think they had a Finnish goalie, and he signed pro. So now they had a big hole and they needed a body. They had committed before I was at Denver. They had committed Evan Cowley, who had really good results in the North American League. So he shows up to Denver and he's a freshman. I think he played 4 games. And this was when I was in contact with Monty about joining his staff. And he had me watch Evan in a game. I think it was in Omaha. And I watched him and he said, "What do you think?" I go, "He looked fine. He looked absolutely fine." So let him be. The mental grind on a 18 or 19-year-old is really difficult. And a lot of it hinges on your personality too. But so I'm at Denver the next year, and I've got Evan, who's really a rookie because he's going to play a lot, and a freshman. His name is Tanner Gillette, who went on to win the Mike Richter Award, I think, his senior year. So they've basically got 2 rookie goalies. Tanner Gillette came out of the Alberta Junior League and smaller. He struggled early because he was back in the net. When goalies are out and on top of the paint, they're confident. And when you see them back in, they're usually uncomfortable. They want to know where home is. They want to know where everything is. So I remember Monty having a conversation. So you tell him that until he gets out of that paint, he ain't got to play. So we went back and forth, but it was a struggle for that year. It was a big struggle for Evan Cowley because he played really well. And then he had a game, I think we're up 3-0. This is, in my mind, a legendary story. We're up 3-0. I think we were number 5. We're Nebraska Omaha was number 2. And it was in Nebraska. And we're up 3-0, I think, in the middle of the game. And they start chipping away. They scored decent goals against Evan. So it goes, we're up 3-2 in the third with maybe 3 minutes left, and Omaha scores, and we take a penalty on the play, on the goal. So now it's a tie game.
And he's shorthanded.
And we're going on the kill. And Monty looks at me on the bench. He says, "Now can we fucking put Tanner in?" And we hadn't even discussed it. So I looked at the clock, and I looked at Monty, and I said, "I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to put a cold goalie in, especially against the power play." And we could have done it. Again, it's a gamble. But I said I wouldn't do it. And the goals against Evan leading up to being tied weren't horrible or anything, but he just didn't make make the saves that he needed to make. And I wouldn't. Of course, they score on the power play, and we lose 4-3.
Oh,
And the fire-breathing dragon and Jim Montgomery came out after the game. And,
yeah.
there were times where Evan was just in tears, because of the stress. And again, I attribute that to, inexperience and youth. So now he had a career at Denver. His numbers, if you ever Google Evan Cowley and look at his numbers in college, crazy numbers, like save percentage of .938 in that ballpark every year.
I'll get him up here if it's on HockeyDB.
Yeah. However, he didn't play much, and I think the other kid won over Jim, and he played the majority of the games, and they won a national championship. So, it all worked out well for him. So Evan turns pro, and he's toiling between American League, East Coast League, American League, East Coast, back and forth. And I remember having a conversation. I said, "Let's get you to Europe." And we had many conversations about this. And we get into contact with people that can help him, like agents over there. So he had a couple of options. And you know where he started out? He's now playing for the top team in Austria, the Vienna Capitals. That's one of the big teams in all of Europe. That's where he is now. He started off in Poland, right? And he went to Gdansk, Poland, and he had a great experience. And I'm watching clips of his games, and I go, hockey's not that bad. These guys can play. But, he started off in frickin' Poland. And then I think the next year he went to Denmark, which I spent a number of years coaching in Denmark, and they produce a lot of good Danish players in the league and in the National Hockey League. So he goes to Denmark. So he's working his way up the ladder and gaining all this experience. Then he went to France. Evan went to, and I don't remember the name of the team in France. He had great success there, and he keeps climbing the ladder. And Last year, he left his team in France, went to Sweden, and now he has the opportunity to go to Vienna Capitals, which is maybe one of the best teams in all of Europe. They have money, they can buy players, and it's a great experience. So my point of bringing this up for Evan is that, I had this conversation on the golf course with Will Prouse and Aaron Sachs yesterday. I said, you know what? I said, I really would like to see guys try to go to Europe. I said, you're going to have an unbelievable life. And I was over there for 10 years. You play a couple of games a week. You're home in your bed every night for the most part. So it's just a different lifestyle.
For
You
sure.
also get to enjoy beautiful cities and great travel. Unless you're meant to be in the National Hockey League, I think that's where you need to be, or at least try.
It's absolutely one of my favorite parts of the game of hockey is how international, and it's definitely a double-edged sword at times where we talked about before the show too about developmental leagues and how many there are. You just talked about sending him to Europe for a little bit to develop his game, and
Yeah.
there's so many different avenues and places that hockey can take you, and that's one of the coolest parts about it. Maybe we can get into a little bit of why you send guys to certain places, what you see that from specific guys from specific places. Like we talked about 3
Yeah.
American goalies throughout this podcast. So, and going back to the last one with Helly and Linus and Swayman, Swayman's American, sorry, not Linus. But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
There's one other kid that you want to talk about Europe. This kid is an unbelievable story. His name is Devin Bobak, Bobak. Kid from Ohio. I had him. My nephew in Maine owned a junior program in the NCDC, right, in Auburn, Maine. So I meet Devin there. He becomes a client. So I've been working with him for 5 years now. So he, very good goalie, played in Shreveport, had great success in Shreveport in the North American League, and they have a really good system how they handle goalies. They don't rush anything. A good job there. So Devin Bobak played there. He had D1 offers, but they were kind of crappy offers, with kind of mid-major schools. And some college programs like to load up a little bit, and you just don't, and I'm telling you, you may want to think about D3. I said, you're big enough. He's 6'3", maybe 6'4", and a very, very good goalie and a future pro, I think. So long story short, he turns down some offers in Division I, and he picks Trinity College right outside of Hartford, I think. It's in the Hartford, Providence area, a D3 school, but a very good D3 school. So you look at his numbers, his freshman year, 1 point.
Yeah, I'm looking at him right now. I'll put him on the screen for everyone
Yeah.
to see that's watching. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and year 2, his sophomore year, get this, he leads his team to the national championship game, and they lose 1-0, 2-0 empty netter. So he does his job, but he's not named goalie of the year. He's named player of the year in all of Division III. And like, holy, and there's not a lot of publicity going on in Division III, but the kid's really good, like really good. So we started, of course, the portal now, the conversation of the portal, do I jump in? And there's schools all over him now, right? And so we were on a phone call, and he said, so-and-so has reached out, so-and-so's reached out, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what do you want to do? He says, I want to stay here. And I said, that's a pretty wise mentality. I said, because if it ain't fixed, don't broke it. You don't want to go to a D1 school where they are hoping maybe you make it, maybe you can play, maybe. And then you wind up being the number 2 guy, and all of a sudden you go from being the guy to being a backup, good enough to play for any Division I school, no question. So he decided to stay. He wanted to be loyal to Trinity. He's just senior now. So right now I am looking in the background, looking for a representation in Europe to get him over, maybe to Poland, for example. And I've told him, I said, you don't want to mess with the minor leagues over here. I go, it's just a dead end. I said, go live a great life in Europe and make some money, but enjoy European cities, enjoy Austria, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, wherever you might wind up, and you will really, really enjoy your life. But only when you live overseas a decade, you learn to appreciate your own country a little bit, but you also learn how the world operates. You gotta, if you're gonna get paid in their currency, you learn about currencies, you learn about transportation, you learn so many, things about daily life and how other people live. And, really rounds you off as a person, I think, if you have the opportunity to go overseas. So I'm a big fan of that. If you're that good and you're meant to play in the National Hockey League, you're not probably going to be missed. They're not
Yep.
going to miss you. You're going to be found. So, but you also need opportunity. But Devin's a really, really good story. And his story is being written as we speak. So,
It's
I'm hoping.
also a great, just Devin Bobeck sounds like a goalie. So it's
Yeah,
a great goalie name.
yeah, it really is. But I had a chance to see him play at another client that played at Amherst College, Connor Leslie, and they played on that same junior team in Auburn, Maine. They were goalie partners. So now he's at Amherst College in Western Mass. Bob's is at Trinity, and they play each other. And I'm at a game where they're playing. Their two teams are playing against. So we were able to grab a bite to eat afterwards and get reacquainted, and took some good pictures and all of that. But it's fun to see these guys progress and have some success. But I think Connor Leslie is now heading towards, he's graduated from Amherst. I think he's like Secret Service type of lifestyle, like really smart guy, really good.
Yeah, you got to be.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He's all A's. Like
I remember I looked that up at one point when I was in middle school, and it was like, yeah, you should know like 2 to 3, maybe 4 languages. And I was like, well, I'm out.
yeah, that's a world I'm not familiar with. But
Yeah.
But Connor Leslie, really good guy. But a lot of other guys have really very talented goalies have really, it's hard to make it. It's really, really hard to make it. And they're gonna face the obstacles. You just gotta keep going. You gotta keep going. But mainly you gotta find a home. You gotta find a place to play. And then there's a stage to go play on. And then and hopefully you progress. But boy, it's almost like there's a glut, Gehrig, a glut of goalies everywhere, especially at the junior level. And it's not easy to make it, but you got to have the fortitude. That's where a kid like Caden Lenz, I think he has the fortitude. He just needs the opportunity, and he's got to play well. He's got to stop pucks. And he's got to win games, and rest is up to him. But he's got, at a very young age, he's got a really unique mindset, really unique. So I think he's going to be a good one, but time will tell.
We're talking about the internationality of the game and how it can send you so many cool places, and the part of that double-edged sword is that means a lot more kids are playing hockey, so it's a lot harder to break through.
Yeah.
I think we did a good job of answering that question, Coach. I feel like we answer one question and I write down 3 more, so we'll be going for a good long while when we again, we're deciding goaltending lab, inside edge, we're still feeling it out, but just like this whole process, we hope you guys enjoy and hit subscribe and like and follow and keep coming back, because like Coach said off record, actually, that he and my dad have this in common. They're both ramblers, so we could do this for a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
All right, buddy.